Hey, what's up, everyone? Al Karim Devani back here with coffee and a cocktail bar. Excited to have Councillor Courtney Walcott on a Tuesday edition. We'll be here Thursday as well, but lots has happened with Courtney, and I wanted to bring him in because you guys had an enormous few weeks. So thank you for joining me after such a big historical moment and time in Calgary.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here to chat about it. I find that this is the kind of stuff that it might go through council and people stop talking about it when in fact it's actually now that we need to put the work in to make sure it's well understood and perfected.
Yeah, no question. Now the work begins. So Courtney, we're going to get into that day, but I want to give folks who don't know you, maybe just viewers listening, watching, a bit about you, how you got into politics, what your background is. Yeah, so run us through it.
You know what? Most people don't. So hi, everyone. I'm Courtney Walcott. Most people don't really know too much about the background of politicians. And it's actually a really good question to ask. It's like, what do you do? What's your why? I used to ask people that when I was deciding to run. Whenever I'd meet up with ex-councillors or people, I'd be like, what was your why? Like, what was the reason why you wanted to run? And to be honest, most people used to say things like, I think I can govern better, or I could do it better than the current councillor, or they'd have an issue.
Yeah.
They'd be like, I want to fix this one thing. And I am of the issue type. This was the thing for me that I wanted to fix. So I was a high school teacher. Most of the kids that I taught this course, it was called the NEST program. And I'll tell you, it was needs extra support and a trauma group, right? So it was really a trauma-informed teaching program. And these kids, you want them to be successful. The things that I learned, our baseline was a very simple one, which was we just need them to show up.
Yeah.
Because getting them to school was actually the biggest success of the day, because the things that they were dealing with outside of school, the things that were dealing with at home, trying to make sure they had safe and accessible homes, make sure they had well put together community lives, those were the things that actually prevented them from being successful in the classroom.
Yeah.
And so COVID came around, I think we all had a little more time on our hands. And when you dig into the reasons why some of these kids couldn't find housing with their family, a lot of it came down to the way that we led the city, the way that we lead the province, the way that we lead the country. And so I figured I might as well take a step into it, because if we can do something about making the lives of these kids outside of school better, they'll be more successful in the classroom. And so it extended to my role on council, because the biggest thing for the future of the next generation has always been housing.
Yeah.
And if people have good housing, they can raise their kids and they can worry about the other things. And everything told me, all the research showed, it was the regulations at the municipal level that you got to crack first.
Yep.
And then, of course, everything else might fall into place if the other orders of government get in line. So that's how I ran. That's why I ran, and that's how I got here.
Yeah, and you're from where originally?
I was born and raised in Scarborough. So for those who know Scarborough, let's get more specific. Malvern. And I moved out here about 17 years ago.
Yeah.
And just in my last year of high school. And it took me a while to learn Calgary the way that I know it today. I think the thing about Calgary that I love is actually just that it's growing.
Yeah.
I think the city that I came into versus the city that's today is significantly different, which means that I'm blessed and grateful to be a part of the leadership that's going to steward the city for whatever the next big change is.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I always hear people who are like, born and raised in Calgary. But for me, the thing that's most exciting is to meet people from different parts of the world. And that's what I've always loved about this city. Like, my parents are refugees. I know you're from Scarborough. I love people bringing things here to this city to talk about, like, what can we do to make the city better and get rooted in the city? So maybe, again, tell me a bit about what that's been like for you, Courtney, like, coming to Calgary, living in Scarborough, growing up there.
I found that there was a lot of culture shock the first time I got here. I grew up in a neighborhood where there was 157 languages spoken at my high school. Right. And of those 157 languages, you end up meeting people from all over the world so consistently that your view of what a community is so different. It was shaped by diversity. And I say that purely because it was actually normal. Like, it was so normal to just see people every day with a variety of different backgrounds and cultures. Like, that was my every single day. And it was at a scale that I still haven't seen in Calgary. And Calgary is the third most diverse country or city in the country. And it's still not at the scale that I was raised in of differences and acceptance. I like to use the word normalization, even though not a lot of people do, because it's not about inclusion and it's not about acceptance either. It was just normal, right? Like, it was just normal to be around that diverse of people. It was just normal to hear those different languages spoken. It was just normal to understand different values like that. That was just how it was. When I moved out west, Admittedly, that's not the Calgary story per se, but it might be later.
Yeah.
And it's definitely becoming it now.
Yeah.
But when I got here, there was a very particular oil and gas energy to the city. It was 2006, so there was a very particular culture that was still being held on. This was a business city.
Mm-hmm.
People came here to work,
Yeah.
right? Like that's part of the reason why my family moved out here before I did. They came here to work.
Yeah.
Now people are having conversations about what it means to like live and grow in this city, and that's pretty cool. I think that's that's not everybody's story, but that was my experience. It was I came here to go to school, I came here for work, and I chose to stay because the city's growing on me.
Yeah,
and the city's growing with me now.
And it's interesting because like I think, like you said, lots has changed, and I've born and raised here. I've seen the cyclicalness of this city. But this feels different for me. And I feel like, your time as a councillor has seen like an unprecedented amount of like change and things moving and things happening. And so, although you've only this is your first term, I feel like it's a 10 term, the amount of things that you guys are dealing with. Like
this has been the longest 3 years of my life.
Yeah, fair. And so like unprecedented growth. Yeah. I know you helped launch the housing kind of crisis task force to kind of figure out how to deal with housing. You've talked about it being a fundamental issue. I'm sure you've had a crash course on everything else though, in terms of how the city business and city operates.
Absolutely.
So tell us a bit about your time and kind of what you've learned and what it's been like amidst like, Alberta booming at its highest pace ever.
Yeah. The biggest thing is, if anyone wants to do this work in the future, the lesson is always just soak it up. Soak it up fast and move quickly because no one moves. People can't slow down for you.
Yeah.
And I think that was something that many of us councillors had to learn really quickly is that there is no such thing as coming into this job fully prepared to be a leader for a city like this. There is no such thing.
Yeah.
You come in and you have to trust the people that you work with, and you have to be very, very careful to open your ears and shut your mouth sometimes, right? To actually like pay attention to what these people are saying, when they're saying it and how they're saying it, so that you can absorb it collectively. Because here's the thing, to put it simply, everyone kind of, what you learn quickly is that everyone exists in a silo. Right? Everyone has their own silos because especially with the way organizations or corporations are run, you're here, people are like, I'm here, I'm doing my job, and I'm going to do the best version of my job as possible. There's a risk to that though. And the risk to that is that in the drive or the push to be successful, you will actually try and elevate your issue or your problem higher than other people's. But when you put it on I always say the scales of justice, when you put it on the balance of probabilities, it might not actually be higher. But that's your job. My job is to succeed in this one area.
Yeah.
So I'm going to elevate this. And if every single person's doing that, that means every single person inside the entire corporation is saying, my problem's the most important. The job of council and the job of senior leadership within a city is to actually try and figure out what is the most important, what is going to have the largest impact, because for many people, it's about running the city in a day-to-day. For council, it's about making sure that the service that we are providing to the citizens is the best that it can be. And those two things actually come head-to-head sometimes. Yeah. Right? Because sometimes if you're here to provide a service to the city, you got to put some things down and say, let's spend all of our energy right here because this is the issue of the day that we need to figure out and solve. Yeah. This is the issue of the day that's going to, if we don't solve this, it's going to stop us from being successful and all those other things. Yeah. And you need like a council, you need leadership to be able to actually do that. To be able to tell someone to like, hey, like I'm with you, I support you, we're going to fix this, but not today. Yeah. Because today I need to do this. And if I am successful here, that will give me the license to dedicate all my energy over here. So that's kind of partially the story of the housing strategy, which was there are so many things that are important in this city that we need to do. But this was the thing that if we don't get this going, all those other things, they're never going to be successful anyway because we'll have let down our citizens by making this a city that no one can afford to live in. And in all honesty, we were already behind the curve. Yeah, housing as a foundation is such a thing I think people miss. And I think they like to politicize other things very quickly. And again, I don't think there is a single solution. We've talked about that at length. The one thing I would say is like, I remember when you came on the scene and you were running and you and I had a conversation, like, and I was kind of taken back by how
forward you were with a lot of your policies and thoughts. I was like, oh shit, Courtney, like I wouldn't say all those things like for you to win this war. And it was more just like, I thought a lot of the things you talked about were great. I got scared because I was like, to go out there and run on all those things, man, I don't know if you win. And I think you and I see eye to eye on many things, but also like I'm a businessman and I know folks think like, oh, like you and Courtney are in each other's pockets. It's like, no, we don't agree on a lot of things. And I'm going to set that stage, but I do want to give you your flowers, like as a minority, as a Black man to win the award the way you did. I was incredibly proud for that representation to be on council, but talk to me about how, like, you know, I think you're a social warrior. You've proven that in the last 3 years. You stand up for the things that you think are right. And almost to a fault.
Sadly, yes. Yeah.
yeah. And so, you know, what I always think about politics is being able to kind of toe the line and find kind of like, you know, find advocates on both sides. But you seem to really run on what you think is right and what you think is good for this city. So yeah, two things. One, I just want to say kudos to you for being here, for winning. But you know, running on what I think is a pretty like set, like, hey, I'm here to do this work and win or lose one term or two term. Like, talk to me about that, because everyone is talking about this is it for you folks who are really trying to push this city in a different direction.
I'll put it. I'll give it my best example is actually something that someone else told me. Back in, I think it was like 2001. Massive, this is going to sound random, I promise you. Massive school shootings in Australia. So early 2000s, I don't know if the date's completely correct. Again, someone shared this like nugget with me. Massive school shootings in Australia. And what ended up happening was in the next election, right before the next election, sweeping gun control came through. Mind you, just point out for gun control advocates around the world, very few massive shootings in Australia since. All of the people who voted for it, for the most part, lost in the next election. And when asked about it, they said something. They said, it's like, hey, like, why would you do this if you knew that it was going to be like a death knell?
Yeah.
And they said, well, sometimes you just got to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And put all the other stuff aside. And so early in the days, because you're right, there was definitely several meetings that I had with my own team where they said, are you sure you want to say this? Yeah. And the answer I had to give was like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I can't, people always talk about honesty in politics, right? And I was like, if I'm not telling the truth, I'm not believable. And this is a problem because it doesn't mean that I'm always right.
Yeah.
And I'm very, very, I like to think that I'm grateful and humble enough to say when I'm wrong and when I can pivot.
Yeah.
But if all the information I have at the time tells me to go one way, including from everything from hearing from people to just reading to research, all of the above tells me to go one way, I have a hard time going the other way because I think it'll be more popular.
Yeah.
Because this is not something that I want to do forever.
Yeah.
And especially something very clear for me is if the reason why I get to do this job for a long time, should I choose to stay, is because I compromised, and those compromises come with extreme costs.
Yeah.
If I compromised, I shouldn't be in this job anyway.
I love that.
No,
Yeah. No, that's cool, man. So, yeah, let's get into that hot topic, I guess, here. So, you know, your task force that you helped assemble, kind of notice of motion that you put in place was to kind of figure out housing. There was a lot of recommendations, but one particular is what got everyone excited. So talk to me about that experience. Talk to me about the whole task force, kind of what you did. We'll jump into the one that turned out to be the most complex for people.
The biggest problem with housing strategies across the country is that they only ever focus on affordable housing.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. But I'll put it this way. If you are someone who's in affordable housing, or if you're leaving the market of housing unrestrained, right? Like when you go to buy a house, there are not enough regulations to support a robust set of housing choices for any individual to go purchase or rent or whatever. Then there's no amount of money that can go into affordable housing to support that, because the need will continue to grow at the same pace, if not faster, than you can bring on government units.
Yes.
Right. And so I knew that from a long time ago, even in our best, right? Like when you go back to the 1970s when we were building post-war, and then that's right when we started to slow it down. When you were building post-war and we were building affordable housing, mostly at the time, it was a social good because it was for veterans. When we were building at that time, we still couldn't keep up pace, but we were closer.
Yeah.
But we couldn't keep up pace because the economy was moving faster. There was more people coming to the country. Our population was growing. And do these sound familiar? These issues were coming so fast that there wasn't enough housing, because what ended up happening was we had our social group, in that case it was like the veterans, but then there happened to be like low income people as well who also needed that support. Then all of a sudden the government decided to go on an austerity measure. The federal government in this particular case, austerity means they wanted to cut the budget, and they cut out all of the affordable housing funding at the federal level. Which pushed it down to the provincial level. And most of the provinces don't have a ton of money because they're running education, they're running healthcare, they're doing a lot. So all affordable housing never got invested in again. And at the same time, on the back end, the market was getting worse. Because cities, I know people like to think about provinces or feds, but cities were actually making housing regulations that were so strict that we weren't even building housing to match market demand. We were building housing to match cultural belief. Right. And when the housing strategy and the housing task force, when I started this work, it was a very simple thing, is that housing is about two things. It's about opening it up so we can be flexible. But it's also changing a culture. Because you can only, if you can make sure that housing is understood as both a basic human need. If you can make it know that people want to live differently. And that if the goal of everybody is to be safe and secure in housing, there's many different ways to do that, and our regulations have to reflect it. And so that was the thought process. And then it was like, how do we do this? And then this is where some humility comes in. Humility was like, I don't know. So let me ask some people. And that was the task force. The task force was, okay, like we need to pull together people from real estate. We need social services. We need affordable housing, market development. We need government, all in the same room to say, let's figure it out. And at the same time, one core message that is one of probably my most proud moment of leadership. I convinced this room of people who have been through, I would say, the gauntlet with politicians who they've been trying to do things, but politicians have fought them on their own solutions. I told them, I was like, let the failure rest on my shoulders. Let it rest on the leader's shoulders. Bring whatever recommendations that you can prove will work. Even if it takes time, bring the recommendations that'll be the right recommendations. And that was the task force that was then turned into the housing strategy. And it was messy getting here. But one of my proudest moments is, of course, is that group of people, that group of individuals who knew how the housing market works. They didn't shy away from just bringing the full-throated, here's the solution, drive this home, and it'll work eventually. And I love that for them, because you don't always get that.
No, I love the breadth of diversity you guys had on that task force intentionally, like you said, being multi-jurisdictional, cross-sectional, upper and lower, trying to connect the ecosystem, and the idea that this can't be solved by any one subset, private or public. People still need to make money in housing. That's one of the things I think people really struggle with is like, I'm not saying it needs to be financialized, but it needs to be profitable just like any business. And this is one of the things I think is really interesting. It's like, there is no one answer. We've talked about this at length, but I think we need to start getting folks who are excited, who are entrepreneurial to help solve this problem. And so this is why, middle is really exciting for me. So I think it opens up this opportunity to get more people involved in housing. It's the first stepping stone. It's funny, one of the things I was talking to Paul Battistella and how, the Battistella family started Connaught Gardens in the 90s, believe it or not. That was their first project. It was a 10 unit. Then they went to Mount Pleasant, did like a 32 unit townhome. Since the 90s, Battistella has delivered over like 1,200 homes in the city of Calgary. And the vast majority are the ownership. And so you think about what middle does for people. That's why I was so excited as well. It's capacity building. But let's talk about it, Courtney. You guys approved to end, or I call it ending exclusionary zoning. It's called Citywide Rezoning. There was a number of amendments made. Even the industry is semi trying to figure it out. playing catch up. Homeowners are playing catch up. Yeah. Can you simplify to us what happened and when this all rolls out and what we can expect here?
I'll start with this. The housing strategy, to your point about cross-jurisdictional, you have 98 recommendations in the housing strategy.
Which honestly, I think is sometimes too many. I was going to say that to you.
Right.
Just from like a focus perspective, like how do we execute 98?
And so this is what makes it, this is what I loved about it, is you could probably organize it in 3 different ways. There's more than that. You can organize a strategy however you want.
Yeah.
So the best way that I always tell people, there are 5 outcomes.
Okay.
And then each outcome kind of has its own dedicated group of people trying to figure it out.
Tactics underneath.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
And so the 98 is the collection of every action within every outcome in total.
Yeah.
Most of it, though, there is, on one hand, there's what can this, I want you to always think about it this way. What can the city do?
Yeah.
What can the city and what can Calgarians advocate to the province to do?
Yeah.
And what can the city and Calgarians advocate to the feds to do?
Sure.
Right. And so those are kind of the 3 action buckets.
Yeah.
So there are a significant number that are just in the action buckets.
Sure.
We need advocating for appropriate rent controls. And I say that because that's the thing that people always like tighten up about. They're like, what is rent controls? Especially anyone who's in business.
Yeah.
And I always tell people, it's like rent controls, it's like anti-displacement policies. Like you just don't want people to be kicked out of their homes because of a profit motive.
Sure.
Right. If there's like a natural cycle to rent increases, that's one thing.
Yeah.
And then there's the other side, which is when profit motives drive people out of home. So rent control is like anti-displacement, anti-rent gouging, but it's not anti-rent increases.
Sure.
Right. The cost of everything goes up.
Yeah.
But that's an advocacy position.
Sure.
We can't do that. Only the province can do that.
Yeah.
Same thing with looking at getting more federal money for to support housing infrastructure.
Yeah.
Again, advocacy position. There's that. So there's a lot in there, but a lot of it is it's us asking for help.
Yeah.
In the actual inner city, the city side, this is where I'll keep it real simple. This is what the city is doing. That's all funded already. We need a housing land fund. We need to purchase more land for nonprofit providers.
Yeah.
That also means that you can be a nonprofit provider.
Doesn't the city already own a significant amount of land?
Yeah, but you don't want to sell those because most of those are parks.
Got it.
Right? And that's the thing. People see a percentage.
Okay.
They say the city is the largest landowner.
Yeah.
Well, that's true, but most of them are
parks.
Parks that are in that number.
So it's the green spaces that we're worried about. Okay.
Right. And so it's like people keep saying like we're the largest landowner, and we are, and we have lots of land to sell.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like that number's so exorbitant because we have so much green space.
Yeah. I also think culturally, when you talk about reform, we used to sell real estate from a profitability perspective. Yeah. That has to change.
Absolutely.
Obviously. Yeah.
Right. And so step 1 is actually buying land.
Yeah.
Right. Because think about the types of housing that we could purchase. You could purchase a small apartment building.
Yeah.
And then hand it over to the appropriate operator, protect it.
Yeah.
Now it's not affordable in perpetuity per se, but you are now removing it from the market.
Sure.
Right. And
sure.
per se, you can do the same thing with open land, give it to a nonprofit for $0.
Yeah.
All they have to do is worry about getting money from other people versus paying us for the land.
Yeah.
That's just the land side. That's funded. Then there's per door discount so that people who are building on that land, they get $75,000 per door to just reduce the cost of that building. Again, another incentive.
Yeah.
There's downtown strategy, turning office buildings into housing, both market and non-market.
Yeah.
All of that is like the significant spending. There's money for transit-oriented development. We're trying to build apartment buildings near trains. All of that is in there. But none of that was controversial.
Yeah.
Because everyone was focused on one thing.
And let's maybe just, I was talking to you off camera about this. Yeah. You see hundreds, if not thousands of units come through Ward 8 because you're in the downtown, you get all the high rises, Absolutely. You're seeing a significant amount of housing in your ward.
Yeah.
What percentage of that housing is actually middle?
Very, very little.
Yeah. Okay.
Very little. Like I'll give it, my favorite example is Altador.
Yeah.
People come in to look at Altador and they always say Altador is overdeveloped.
Yeah.
There is 2 things that are key. One is that 33rd on the Marta Loop Main Street is starting to see apartment buildings.
Yeah.
So people will point to those.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, they'll start pointing to row houses.
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact date range, so I'd have to go back and look at this, but I believe it was up to like 2022. From 2018 to 2022, there have been 43 parcels of land that have turned into row houses throughout all of Altador, and that includes like MCGs, RCGs. You don't need to know what those are. But like that's across districts. 43.
Yeah. Even if you were to say those are 10 units each, that's only 400 units.
That's 400 units, right? Out of a community that has, I think, if my memory serves, 2,500 units.
Yeah.
Right. And like, so the numbers are not crazy, but mostly it's duplexes. It's single rebuilds. People are seeing those and they're bucketing them with this middle housing that's not being built at scale.
Yeah.
It's apartments, right? 6 stories and up in the Beltline and around. And it's still mostly single detached rebuilds that we're seeing, duplex rebuilds that we're seeing. We're only just now starting to see people get into middle housing.
Yeah.
It comes up a lot on our council agendas.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And that's not because there's a lot of them. That's actually just because we have a permissive zoning for singles, duplexes. So they have to come in for a land use change.
Like 40% of your time. But so, sorry, I distracted you because you were
No, but like, you're
going
right.
to tell me what
we spent a lot of time on this particular housing form.
Yeah.
But that time spent doesn't equal houses built.
Well, and time costs money on both sides for everybody and delays it. But
and so that's what this rezoning was.
Yeah.
Was about actually moving things forward.
Yeah.
So the reason why rezoning is important, because it's real simple. It's just people can build a single right now. In many communities, they can build a duplex.
Yeah.
Now they can actually get flexible.
Yeah.
In any community, you can look at your parcel of land and you can say, okay, what can I build here for my family? What can I build here for whoever else is going to live here next?
Yeah.
It's now you can build singles, you can build duplexes, you can build a row home.
Yeah.
Cottages, that's 2 in the front, 2 in the back.
Yeah.
Backyard suites, basement suites, all of it's legal now.
Yeah.
Right. This type of housing that was not legal, which is why it took up so much of our time, is now legal. And that was one recommendation.
Yeah.
And the reason why that recommendation, and this is why I think it's controversial, is because it's a proximity one.
Yeah.
When I talk about spending money on land, that land is over there.
Mm.
When I talk about building affordable housing, they're thinking of apartment building in the Beltline. When I think about transit-oriented development, they can point to it. They say, go build by Westbrook, go build by Fish Creek.
Yeah.
The idea of this one's hardest because this is the one solution in the strategy that might actually come to your neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a proximity problem, is that people are very comfortable and they want these solutions. But I think for a long time, people always thought those solutions would be over there.
Sure.
And what I'm doing and what I've tried to do is I actually tried to invite people in and say, no. Everyone has a role to play in the solution.
Yeah.
And your community has a role to play too. Your community can have more homes than it currently has.
Yeah.
They don't have to be apartment buildings.
Totally. And you guys obviously listened to a significant amount of Calgarians over a significant amount of time. Yeah. You guys took that feedback and you kind of made amendments to figure out how to make sure those concerns were addressed. And a lot of folks I've heard leadership at council and folks talking, saying like, Calgary's not listening with all these people who are coming out to speak. It's like, for me, it's like, no, like I want to see 5,000 people and I don't want to make your life harder, but I do want to see that level of engagement on housing. And I want it to continue in perpetuity because I love the dialogue and the conversation. Even when sometimes it's maybe not respectful, I still love that folks are engaged. Like it brings a new perspective. It makes housing that much more important. It brings it a new energy. But tell me about the amendments that you made and what implementation like this will look like and how you are seeing it happen and how we ensure it happens in a respectful way, in a way that people can be proud of and still feel like they belong in those communities.
You know, the thing that divides people the most on this issue, in my opinion at least, is they come to council, so council's process about land use changes, they come to council and they often want to talk about the things that come next.
Yeah.
And so what I mean by that is we approve, I describe it like this. We approve opportunity, but the actual design is not something council approves per se.
Yeah.
We approve the rules and whoever designing their building has to fit within the rules.
Yeah.
But we approve opportunity. And so people come to try and deny the opportunity to build something that they don't like, or they come to support the opportunity to build something they do like. That's kind of what council talks about. What that means, though, is that people are actually coming to have a conversation in one place when we actually want them to have the conversation somewhere else.
Sure.
Often what I mean by that is it's not to stop conversation ever. Yeah. It's just that the language I'll use is people want to talk at land use, but it's really about the development permit in this case, which is what is that? What are they actually building beside you?
Yes.
Right? What are they building near you? That's the questions that are all get answered. And so what I found is simple. Is that many of the people who showed up, they just wanted certainty of what will build beside them. Yeah. And heavy restrictions in land use can provide that. Yeah. Whereas we have so many of the amendments were actually about ensuring that we can allow housing to get built. Yeah. And also allow you to better understand how to comment on what your neighbor can build so you can compromise and make a better product.
Yeah.
Right? So I always make jokes. It's like people are always worried about parking. And I'm always like, yeah, parking is a really important thing. And this is the one trade-off that I admit no one will ever solve.
Sure.
Because historically we've learned one thing is that more parking equals less housing.
Yeah.
And so that is always the one trade-off where it's just about information.
Yeah.
But if you're worried about privacy, let's talk about windows. You're worried about sunlight, let's talk about roof slants.
Worried about landscaping.
You're worried about landscaping, let's talk about trees. Let's talk about, like, those things are all so important. And so there were so many amendments to strengthen that process.
Yeah.
Because most of council, 9 out of 15, acknowledge that we still got to build housing, but we can improve how we share in the construction journey and the development journey of what happens near you.
So walk me through the amendments. So, like, real quick, trying to simplify.
That's why I kept it as simple as
I
just did.
That's what I mean.
It was like amendment to like bolster the development permit process, right?
So there's like engagement now?
Engagement, just so we need to make sure, you can ask the question, who's going to engage? Should it be the person who's applying to change their home, or should it be the city on their behalf?
Yeah.
Most of council said whoever's applying to change the home should talk to their neighbors.
Sure. So there's a
developer, whoever's building, you got to go talk to your neighbors. Great. And I think that's perfectly fair.
I think it's great.
That's wonderful, right? Yeah. We have to talk about making sure that we are looking at the future state, right? The future rules.
Yeah.
What rules can we change?
So you guys are looking to come back and monitor? Is that what it was?
Absolutely. So we got long-term monitoring for them. We also want to make sure it works.
Yeah.
Right. So we got measurement strategies in the housing strategy. We want to know how many units are being built.
Yeah.
Right. We want to talk about pricing, rent increases, all these things in an area, because you know that if we're going to do this, we got to make sure it has an impact.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it was all around ensuring that the future state of development, how people are building, is better than how they're building today.
Yeah.
But we didn't want to stop people from building.
Totally. Right. So I think the key fundamental change was probably around the parking, like you were saying. You went to a 1-to-1 ratio based on the age of your community. Is that what it was?
Yeah. The easiest way to describe it is newer communities that are less likely to redevelop in the near future.
Yeah.
Who don't have access to like good transit yet.
Yeah.
Until they have access to good transit, they still have the 1-to-1 parking rules that we would have before, right?
Yeah.
If you're not in that area where you have a BRT or a LRT near you,
So it might limit the number of units essentially in those newer communities.
You can still build row homes and so on, but you just have to play with your land a little bit better to fit parking in.
For sure.
If you are not near transit.
Well, and I think like you knew this, Courtney, like we started middle for this reason. Same reason that you're doing this is how do we actually support homeowners to own this opportunity themselves? And so the whole reason why we're creating this program, why we're having these conversations, is my hope is that as cities across the country start to recognize that we need to allow for more optionality, that we can actually get homeowners to get through this process. Because as someone who's been in the middle developing this for over a decade, I can tell you I still don't have it solved. We're still fighting challenges. And like you said, I think the work is just beginning. And we need to figure out how high housing sits as a priority within our city. And, you know, a lot of folks are like, well, this is not going to be affordable for everybody. It's funny, like, I just saw the first row house we ever built in South Calgary just got listed. We built it in 2016. It's beautiful. It's a 3-bedroom. It's on the corner. It's amazing. And it's listed for $659, like it's a block off 33rd, like incredible location. I think we sold it for $599.
Yeah, it didn't appreciate very much.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. And so like for me, like I believe the proof is in the pudding. There's an opportunity to bring this housing form back. And most importantly, I'm hoping that middle can help get homeowners up to speed.
I have stats on this.
Yeah,
I'm a nerd. So
I love it.
In my nerd life, I asked our assessment team to go back 20 years.
Yeah.
Separate singles and duplexes from like major multifamily, like row house.
Yeah.
For those of you who care, MCGs, there's lots of DCs, all these other different types of multifamily units to find out how much they appreciated over time.
Yeah.
And universally, the better the land is used, the smaller the appreciation over time is. So things stay affordable longer.
Yeah.
If the land is used better, which means like more homes on a single piece of land versus one.
Yeah.
And that was like a significant realization. It's like, look, cities can't change everything, but this is proof that our current zoning is actually driving the inflation of housing versus other different housing types. If we have enough of them, it'll create balance because they appreciate slower.
Yeah, yeah. No.
Still a home for someone to live in, just it'll be affordable for longer than a home like
Yeah.
a single family, they go, the last 2 years, it's been like 35% increases, right? So it's
crazy.
like
Yeah.
insane.
Well, man, I appreciate you. I appreciate your efforts. I appreciate all of council's efforts to get this through. I know you guys are going to continue doing this good work, but thank you for being a champion of housing and not in the pockets of private developers. But I think actually putting citizens first, which has been really cool for me to see. I know people think you and I meet all the time, but we don't. I saw your meeting calendar was published and I wasn't on there. We're not meeting anywhere specifically. So, but yo, thank you. I look forward to continuing to watch you, man. And whether you decide to run again or not, I appreciate all your efforts. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how the city evolves and this conversation continues.
Yeah, this just, like, think about it. 2 years to get the strategy passed in full.
Yeah.
Now we actually get to go out and make it better. So I'm excited to do so because it's time to honestly protect our people, right?
Yeah. And if you have ideas for Courtney and their office, hit them up. They're always available. They're always willing to have conversations about how they can improve the implementation of housing and make it more affordable and accessible to Calgarians. So yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate you.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, take care, everyone.